Can we fix what Yamaha apparently can't? Well, they're not paying me to do this, but this customer is. We're gonna take this brand new YZ85, jazz it up the horsepower, and we're gonna see if this YZ85 platform can be competitive with its competition. Everybody who races 85s knows that the class is dominated by the KTM group bikes. Gasgas, Husky, KTM. And it's no secret, if you're a dad and you own a stock YZ85, or you own a KTM Husky or Gasgas, that the KTM Husky and Gasgas are a far superior engine package. We actually did 2 bikes for this client, so we're gonna show you the dyno run of the other bike, which is stock, and then we dynoed that one and jazzed it up, it's out the door, and we just finished up doing this bike. So we're gonna show you what a modified Yamaha can do. This bike is all stock minus a V-Force 3 reed system, and it has an FMF silencer on it. All right, boys, a couple dyno pulls. We've gotten some data on it, and pretty consistent. So there's a gas in red. Pulled it up just to see what, or a KTM actually on that one. So let's go through those last 2 dyno pulls. So there's the last 2 that we just did that you saw. The very last one revs a little further because the pipe temperature is a little bit hotter, so it goes a little further. Revs pretty well, 12,000 before it signs off. Not a bad power curve, honestly. The torque curve is really flat, coming in about 9,000. It kind of hits hard, you can hear that. So this little area here is where the power valve is opening, and it really comes on strong. If you rode the bike right there, it's a very aggressive power change. The dyno doesn't show that very well because it's such a heavy drum, and so it doesn't change its speed very quickly. You would certainly notice that more in the track. There'd be more of like a pickup here. So anyway, not bad, but like I said, this is that KTM. So that's an all-stock KTM in yellow there. So on the Yamaha, we're at a peak of about 19.3, 19.2 on this KTM, which wasn't one of the best KTM runs I've ever gotten. I just pulled one up that I had. I could go get a better one that's not so jerky, but peak there of about 21, 31, over 21. I've had some be at 22. I think we posted a Husky with that. So not quite the very low end. The KTM's really fantastic at. And then right here, the KTM's a little better all the way up and all the way over the top. So not bad though. I mean, you're not that far off. Yeah, it's a couple horse off, 2 horse off, but 2 horsepower is the difference between winning and losing for most people. We're gonna see if we can do a little port work, a little carb work, and get this thing up in the maybe 23, 24 range by the end of today. Yamaha underwent a very big revision not too long ago to add a power valve to this bike. For all the tooling and expenditure and effort that took, and probably a lot of money on the back end in engineering, Yamaha didn't do a very good job. This is shocking to me because Yamaha should be able to at least match their competition. All right, fellas, on the porting bench, 2022 YZ85, getting her all prettied up. The big change from 2019, from the 2018 model, was they went to a power valve, which is this addition there, and the valves are in there. Power valves at low end. Here's an older generation cylinder that we had modified back in the day. This is actually a real big time ripper. Very, very good cylinder here. I think this makes close to 24, 25 horsepower in our dyno, something like that. So let's look at the differences between what they did on the old model versus the new model. So if you look there, okay, look at the port sizes, the volumes of those transfer tunnels. Okay, now let's compare that to this one. Way smaller. Don't know if that comes off well on video, but there's really no comparison between the two. I can't quite get these cylinders lined up correctly, but there. So there's that one. There's that one. There's no comparison in actual size. And what's interesting to me is this new one runs pretty good. It doesn't run bad, and with mods it runs pretty good. But what we found was, and this is kind of the big difference, was that, man, I'm looking at my handiwork here. I did a nice job on this one. Really nice job on this one. What we found was that this new cylinder does not big bore well. It does not go to a super mini, so like a 105. When you get bigger, these restricted or smaller size transfer tunnels become a little bit of a problem. And so that's something to keep in mind in this newer model. It's not as super mini friendly. On these older motors, we were capable of getting up around the 30 horse mark as a 105, pretty close to that number pretty easily. On these newer motors, it's been a struggle if you don't put a lot of R&D into it to get much above 26. And we've had other shops 112s come through for this Yamaha that are making 23, 22, 23. Not very good, and I don't blame them. It took a lot of work for us to find the horsepower with this newer style cylinder. Now, something that you may have noticed between the 85 and the 65 is that they're very similar. They share the same low end, a little bit different clutch, but pretty much the same cylinder. The 65 is just smaller, and I think what they did was they built one cylinder to do 65 and 85, and the tunnel size is optimized for those two engines, but not optimized to go any bigger. Big tunnels is not necessarily great for horsepower. The shape is really critical. Here's a YZ125. You can see it's not very big. So in comparison to this older cylinder, you can see they're wider, but they're not bigger. So this is more modern. This new one is closer to the new YZ125, or to the older Gen YZ125, which is similar to the new one. However, so it's not a bad thing. But I think once you try to go big, you try to build a nice super mini out of them, and unfortunately, these tunnels become a little bit of a problem. At least that's been our testing. So we're getting this thing jazzed up, getting this exhaust port. Now we got to go through and pretty everything up and get everything fine-tuned. I've got the ports roughed out where they're supposed to be. Man, I did nice on this one. I really like what I did on this one. Anyway, this one will get all tidied up, and then to go back on the dyno, and we'll see you there on the dyno. All right, here's the head that we cut for this 2022-2023 YZ85 build. We've gone up about a point in compression, just over a point, and pretty simple. Just a very simple head mod. Polished it out so it'll look good for a little while until until it gets a little carbon on it, but really doesn't make a difference, blinged or not blinged. Theoretically, a super polished finish will reflect more heat, and you can make a little more horsepower. And this has been shown in studies to be effective. So if you polish the crap out of your piston and your head, you can get maybe a little bit of power. I'm talking a very small amount. Unfortunately, it doesn't last very long, and that power goes away. That was kind of the theory behind some of these thermal barrier coatings, but they unfortunately have some drawbacks that were not so good that lead to detonation. And so on high horsepower builds, a lot of those thermal barrier coatings don't work very good. So anyway, we're getting the cylinder cleaned up, ready to go back on, and then we're gonna put this head on and get this thing making some horsepower, see what she does. Package, our goal is to not kill the bottom end, make a little bit more horsepower, and see if we can bring this bike into the 21st century, as we would say, and be competitive and do what Yamaha apparently can no longer do in-house, which is develop industry-leading two-strokes. For a long time, Yamaha was always setting the benchmark in the two-stroke market. Seems like those days have left them. They've redesigned the 125. It's still behind the 8-ball. They redesigned this 85. Still behind the 8-ball. Now that doesn't mean that this platform doesn't have potential. We're going to show you that in today's video.
All right, guys, YZ85. I've got 3 dyno charts here for you, 3 different runs, 3 different combos. Let's get to it. So the stock run, which we already showed you, that's in red. And this is what we did with our mod here in green. Some port work, a little carb work, some jetting. That is an all apples to apples mod. That means the only changes there are the port, the head, and the carburetor and jetting. So we were able to pick that up from a peak of about 19 horsepower to a peak of about 2192, 22. So that's a 3 horsepower gain. And then over here, well, this is the other mod. This is the new 23 bike. The only difference between the bike in green and this bike here is the exhaust system, and the exhaust port is slightly, and I'm talking less than 0.2 of a millimeter higher. So you can see it loses a little bit on the front side all the way up, but it shifts the power and gains a lot of RPM. Look how much more RPM. So you could say this one signed off and is done here at 12,100. And this other one at the same level of sign off about here is done at about 12,900. It's about 800 RPM. RPM is really important for certain types of riders, and most of you guys are riding a lot up here. But if we wanted to shift this power back down, we would go back to the stock pipe, and that would move this entire power curve a little bit to the left. That's what pipes can do in certain instances, especially when you start modifying cylinders. Something to note is peak torque did not improve between the mod or with one or the B. Oftentimes, that's what you're really gonna see, is that you just move that torque curve around, and then of course you change your power around. So that other mod got us to a peak horsepower. It's in yellow, it's terrible to see, but it's 2314. And that's a pretty stout little bike. Now, and let's add a KTM test to the mix here. That's gonna be this one now in red. This is a stock KTM 2022, all stock right off the showroom. And so you can see we have really bridged that gap with our modified 85 with a stock pipe here in green. So a little bit better peak, signs off just a hair earlier, and pretty good up through the mid-range. Not quite as good on the ultra low end. This has to do with the power valve design. There's just no way that Yamaha's ever gonna compete, and the ports are a little bit better on that KTM. But look at our mod bike, our other mod bike. So we have the one mod here. This is a stock here in yellow. And then we have the stock pipe version of this. And then we have a slightly higher, about 0.2 higher exhaust port, and then the other pipe, the FMF pipe on this bike, which really shifted the power up top. So now we've got a very competitive package making more horsepower than a stock KTM, more RPM. We gave up on the front side to get there, but depending on how your kid rides, I know a lot of people like to look at the chart here. We do as well. This is important, but we've learned that most kids are riding here all the way back to here. When they shift, they're screamed out here at about, well, I mean, to be honest with you, 15, 16,000 RPM. And then they oftentimes shift back down here to peak power. So that's how a lot of kids of the faster variety ride. And then some of the slower kids want that front side. So depending on how you build that package, we can have all these options. So from stock in yellow to one of the modifieds in green to this other modified in dark green versus a KTM here in red. So I think we did pretty darn good on this mod package. That's a huge, huge improvement in performance for that YZ85, brings it into the 21st century. It's really what Yamaha should have built. This is really what they could have built and had a competitive package here in green versus red KTM, but they just didn't do it. All right, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.